Hello, I'm Glenn W. Hunter, and with me today is Tamika Carter, and we are TIPS IE, Trauma Informed Preventive Services of the Inland Empire. And today we're going to talk about, school starting and the trauma that's associated with it with kids and families in this environment. Unfortunately, Tamika is here to give us a lot of insight with regards to exactly how this trauma is going to process. So, Tamika, if you're comfortable, I'm going to start right at the tough questions.
All righty, let's go.
So, with parents and families, when you think about how they're now going into this new world of virtual education, blended learning, particularly here in the Inland Empire, they're going to want to pivot when the new processes that are being put in place, they're not going to necessarily perform as expected. So they're going to look to pivot quickly. School officials, from what I'm gathering, particularly from the superintendent town hall that we had alluded to in our previous show, they're going to require patience. How do you expect those two polar opposites to work out?
Patience is definitely the key. I think we are at a place, it came to me a few days ago, that this is really where teachers probably need a lot of parent support. One of the things I thought about, which is, we looked at being asked, should we do blended or should we do distance only? And I kind of asked, wait, can we back it up? Because we haven't asked, are we ready to engage our kids in academic learning again on a daily basis? And I think that those traumas with just, even just the daily frustrations of trying to understand your literature or trying to understand chemistry, that on top of a parent who's stressed in the home, who may be with or without employment or the only essential worker, that is a lot of chaos and it is a lot of baggage for someone to have to deal with emotionally. And so I think right now, if we want to be able to kind of protect our kids, we need to make sure we're allying with our teachers more, that we're communicating with them more. I know when I saw one of the school board meetings, they made the comment that this was the most parent participation they'd received when they did these surveys. And so we need to keep that energy. Because the truth is, a lot of times what we hear when we push and we say, wait, we're upset with the teacher for something that's not working, they say, that's not in my jurisdiction. And while I do think the teachers do have to do their part in advocating and going to leadership to say, hey, this rule, this protocol doesn't necessarily line up to what I'm seeing in my classroom, they also need our support to do that. They need our support, they need the student support, because they don't want to look like they're just speaking for their own selfish or whatever desires. And so I think that this right now, this time is going to be a good time for us to say, because like I said, I've complained every week. This is a lot of work, scheduling my kiddo and keeping my schedule is a lot. And I thought, the teacher. And I'm sure the teacher's thinking, well, the standards. So I think this is a time for communication and for understanding, a time for us to say to our teachers, hey, how are you today? How are you doing? And to be able to say, what can I do what with my voice, with my pen, with my email, with my showing up, what can I do to support you when it's time for you to go to administration and make a call and advocate for what's best for the students in the classroom, that of course includes my child.
Now, I think it's interesting as you're articulating this particular evolving reality is that as school officials are requesting patience, the teachers are the ones that are trying to corral the young people virtually. I mean, there is no door for them to go wander in front of to make sure nobody walks out. So I think that there is that need to have clear communication. And I think that's going to be one of the unsung challenges is that communication, because the officials aren't dealing with that they're not necessarily dealing with that level of pushback from the student because they are in fact physically removed. Are these the musings of a madman, or do you think that actually has legs?
No,
With
I think we've all long noted and been concerned about some of the, administrator or, corporate level school officials who make decisions, but they don't look at kids every day. They don't spend time with kids. I've been seeing some of the funniest little memes about um, Johnny's gonna go to school with a Spider-Man mask, and he's gonna come back with the Batman one because he traded with his friend at lunch. And so when kids and they, snot, sneeze, and complain, and you spend hours on hours a day, either as a parent or as a teacher in the classroom with them, that some of these beautiful protocols that we put together for returning physically to school, they're just not realistic. And even more, they're not realistic in schools where you have high behavior problems, where you have high incidences of poverty, and other disciplinary issues where you have, a lot of kids who are dealing with emotional disturbances or trauma. You are going to see a lot. I mean, even as we talk about teenagers, one of the markings of teenage depression is actually irritability and defiance. It's not just sitting and crying like adults do. And so I kind of foresee, I don't know, a group of high schoolers deciding that they're going to show their rebellious nature by all snatching their masks off and running down the halls. And kids do stuff like this. They walk out, they do things, they get groupthink. And so, but the medical implications of that, or the procedural implications that follow that, what does that look like? And I think that, we just cannot necessarily plan for what young people do, especially this generation. They're so creative, they're so innovative, they're really independent thinkers. And so, but when they get together, it gets interesting. So I think that we're going to definitely have to really, really get people in place, or at least hear the voices of people who spend hours a day with children. We cannot let people continue to make decisions for the kids who don't have them.
One of the things that I haven't heard this actually come up yet, but as you were describing that reality, that we're going to see are the kids literally being quicker at adjusting to the environment. I mean, and you implicated that, but not just because they communicate well among themselves in their own clusters. I'm going to give it the name the TikTok effect. Misbehavior can now circulate much faster than the adults will be able to report on their misbehavior. So one good prank can literally go nationwide before lunch.
Oh yeah. James brought it up in a few of one of our other webinars, and it was just the truth. Like if they want to take the control and the reins, they get technology way better than we do. So they really will have that power. And I think as someone who's always loved and been a child advocate, I'm excited to see them take that power, because I don't believe they'll all rebel and they'll all, just drop out of school or whatever horrible things we think they might do. I think this is just really a great opportunity for them to take their learning into their hands, to be more responsive, not just responsive in terms of answering, academic questions, but responsive in terms of being able to let their teacher know, hey, this style works for me. When you used this PowerPoint or whatever it is, it worked. That thing didn't work. I think it's going to give them that power. There will definitely be those who are defiant. There will definitely be those who seek to, derail the entire thing. But I think that a lot of the kids do want to learn. Whenever I work with a young person who's having academic problems or school-related problems, I ask them, do you have a problem with school or do you have a problem with learning? Those are two different things.
Mhm.
Even still, someone brought up, I was in some sort of webinar today about just, I think it was Black Minds Matter, something that's coming out of, I believe, San Diego State. Um, but they talked about that whole thing with kiddos, and how we get in this pattern. A lot of educators get in a pattern of, having disregard and disdain and distrust for our students. And so in a disciplinary, in a virtual place, what does that look like? Does that look like you always muting the kid who you don't like his critical thinking? Does that look like, what does it look like when someone's misbehaving? Is it because they're typing on something else? Just what is going to be the range of what we call misbehavior? What will be something that we either, through the proverbial get out my classroom thing, we shut them down? Or, will we work with them? Will there be behavior specialists? So I think that a lot of others, there's so many unanswered questions about how this would work that it concerns me, especially when we think about students of color. because a lot of times whatever's designed is not designed with them in mind, and they end up getting the short end of the stick.
I think that's definitely an important component that has to be managed, just the cultural differences. And again, in the Inland Empire, we have a diverse population. So the teachers realize that, but now again, there's that technological filter that they have to navigate. The kids will definitely navigate it. But, the time does come when they do leave the classroom and continue to learn. And we used to call them extracurricular activities. But now a lot of them have been suspended, but that doesn't mean that that appetite or that inclination is gone. They still want to throw a ball around. They still want to do other things. They want to sing. They want to dance. Those things haven't gone away. But the school is still going to have to deal with either not having it or finding a way to channel that expression within the technological confines. From your perspective, what works communally for kids to actually be able to express themselves in a physical fashion or an extracurricular fashion? And what works well individually for them?
So number one, and I love music, right? So music is communally gonna work. I think that's one that we've already seen people collaborate. A splice screen with a drummer here and a keyboarder there. I think Chino Hills sang a song during the quarantine time, during I think spring, and their choir saying it was beautiful. So I think music will be one of the easiest or best ways to have kind of this communal extracurricular activities. Extracurricular activities. I think about how we've been saying for years, like, man, we shouldn't have put art and music out of our schools.
Right.
And so now I think that's going to be, it has a lot of times been what kids come to school for. I mean, for me, if I've got to sit on a computer all day and do math and all these other things, I would love to have that break for music. So art, I don't know how that would be done virtually, but I'm sure there's some amazing art teachers and artists out there who are thinking it up and are going to come up with something. Sports, that's a hard one. I've seen some states where they've actually approved sports to start back, but haven't yet to approve for school to come back. And there are times I'm like, that's kind of weird. However, as I'm looking at my own kids, I'm like, man, you guys need to go do something. Like, go do something.
Right.
So I think virtually, again, community music's a great idea because it's also a way to learn to communicate and to express ideas. And it's healing as well.
Mhm.
Second, I would say social skills groups, and that's something I'm developing and I'm working on. That we're going to need to probably have kids in some sort of activities where they're developing social skills with one another. Again, communication skills, all of that, conflict resolution skills. So I'd like to see that go ahead and go virtual because I think that gives them an opportunity. If the downside of technology is that you can become very just individualistic. You can be in a silo and not be talking to other kiddos. And so I think seeing things like that will help, just kind of social skills building groups or character building groups, that kind of stuff. And then, of course, any group learning experience is going to be something. It could be a group cooking class. So I think hopefully we'll see a lot of those emerge for young people in schools and maybe even from community-based organizations that can offer kids those opportunities to interact with one another, to learn skills, to excel at something outside of just English language arts and math.
I think one of the things that school administrators and teachers have to be very mindful of is that they don't try and fit a physical experience into a virtual world. I believe our children will grab the technology that they have, the technological tools. I mean, in our particular or our districts, everyone's getting Chromebooks. They're going to find ways to communicate and artistically express themselves, physically express themselves. Here I am, I'm getting ready to lift up two people, and they're, but that expression I think has to be embraced because that is part of that's part of their learning, but more importantly, that's part of the social skills that you pointed out. They are in essence existing through a screen, but to that generation, that is part of their social bonding.
Oh, yeah. Well, and social skills are still important, right? Because social skills are learning to take turns, right? To not be speaking the entire class section or during small groups and not allowing someone else to raise their hand and speak, or so it's a lot in social skills that they're still going to need, and they're still going to need in the virtual classroom. Something I work with kids on is just raising your hand, right? When you're working with young people or someone who's never really experienced academic success, you got to go over the simple pieces of how are you raising your hand? Are you doing it like this? Are you that kid who raises it and then when the teacher doesn't call on you, they put it back down, or do you keep it up and then do you become angry every time you raise your hand and the teacher doesn't call on you? And so we work on just itsy bitsy things like that. And I think all of those things are still going to be relevant in the virtual education world. And when we're dealing with groups or these large groups of classrooms that some of the teachers will have, it's going to be even more important that young people are able to kind of control their impulses, again, to take turns, to respect other people's time, and for them to speak in turn.
Oh, wow. So kids will be juggling emotions, teachers will be juggling emotions, parents are going to juggle emotions. I mean, at the end of the day, this is something new for our parents. Parents are going to get frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
So when you start thinking about where that frustration can come from, all the different angles, what do you recommend for them, the parents, to manage their trauma, primarily in the event that their peers and their authority figures are adapting poorly?
Pour yourself a nice little cup of tea. I think, check your expectations first. Check your expectations. Check in on your kid. As much as I love, love, love education, I love academics, I still say it's not more important than their emotional well-being. And so I think checking in on them, like I said before, checking and just making sure my kids are okay socio-emotionally, that helps to ease any frustrations or anxieties that I'm feeling. Another thing is check your expectations about what they're going to accomplish and what you can support. This is where I keep saying I really hope that we, as districts, come up with a plan to support maybe single parents, plans to support parents who are working out of the house or working in the house and can't just take the time to help with schoolwork, or to make sure that I think a few days ago my kid just didn't know how to turn on the join audio button, and so those little disruptions, so a lot of parents are going to get really frustrated about. And so I think, they're going to have, again, I keep going back to communication. You've got to communicate with your employer. You've got to communicate with your partner, with the co-parent if they are in or out of the house, and with the teacher. I think it's not a bad idea to say, hey, Mr. Smith, I'm struggling as a parent. And I think communicating with the teacher and saying, hey, you're doing a great job. I don't know how on earth you're getting this done. I think just knowing that you're in it with someone else and you're not the only one who's frustrated sometimes eases those feelings as well. And then, of course, solution focus says if you're frustrated, find a solution for it. What is frustrating you? Do you need to get up a little bit earlier to plan the day out? Do you need to, have your kid on a Google Calendar schedule or whatever to where you can see what they need to do and you guys can play off each other's schedules? And so find the solution, because if it's something, that's frustrating you every single day, at some point you're going to problem solve through that. So those are kind of some of my big ones. Again, stay in communication with the teacher. Don't bombard the teacher, but just stay in communication. Let them know that you are open and you're receptive and you're open to change or suggestions. And if you're that way, they tend to be that way as well. It's when parents are rigid and when they come to tell you what their kid doesn't and does and what is and what isn't, that's when we see teachers kind of fall back and just really start having deficit thinking and ignoring your child in class. So if I can just be real about it. So don't be that parent. Please don't be that parent. Because I advocate for parents. I do. I advocate for parents in tough situations, but don't be an ugly parent. Because teachers are dealing with a lot right now. As we even discussed them going back to school, that has got to be the craziest thing, that they are going to have to put their health at risk like this. So, and that's just another point of frustration. Know you're not in this by yourself, and you might not be the one who has it the worst.
You're a mom, you're a therapist, you've been in a building. What is your single best piece of advice for the parents who are listening to help them cope with what's about to happen?
Put yourself in your child's mind. Like, this is real therapeutic, right? If you've got a fifth grader, I want you to take yourself back to your 10 or 11-year-old self in the fifth grade and just walk through this. Think about who and what you were back then. Think about how you thought back then, what affected you, what made you feel stable, what made you feel insecure, what, when the adults around you did certain things, how did they impact you? So take some time to really reflect on that. I do this a lot with parents with their kids as they're dealing with school issues because a lot of times our parents are transferring the issues that they had in school onto their children, or they're treating the principal the way they would have treated the mean principal at their school or something. And so just take the time to kind of put yourself in your shoes. And so that way you're going to think about the choices you're making, the things you're saying in front of your child or even to them, because it's about protecting them. And again, I say we've had to adjust to some things in life. We've gone through some things. We've had adjustments. This is maybe a big one for some of our younger kids. This might be the first huge adjustment for some of them. And so just continue to really be empathic with your kiddos. And I think that's my biggest thing. Think kids first.
Wow. Again, I'm Glenn W. Hunter. With me is Tamika Carter, and we are with TIPS, i.e., Trauma Informed Preventive Services of the Inland Empire. We're about to go into some new uncharted waters. I think it's going to be exciting. Please continue to stay with us as we navigate through what's happening with our youth, what's happening in our school buildings, and how, one way or another, we're going to get this to work out. Again, thank you for joining us.